Hey everybody, my guide rail needs an upgrade. So you're gonna laugh at this because I have the old black Splinter guide on here. And I'm gonna show you how to replace it with the new, I think it's since 2009 new Splinter guide. So let's just peel this off. And the big difference on the Splinter guides over the years is this. And I'm just gonna flip it around so you can see it. I'm just gonna peel that off. And you see that? You're left with that schmutz. Let me flip it over here. Oh, sorry about that, Chris. Let me flip it over so we get a better view of that. Okay, so let's look at it. You're left with this. With the new Splinter guide, when you pull it off, you're not left with this. But what we wanna do is we wanna clean this up. So I'm gonna start down here, and I'm just gonna start with a sharp razor blade, and you're gonna see how I can just take my time cleaning it up. Just like this. And that's all it is. Okay, just be careful when you get to the end because you want to get all of that off. And yeah, my rail's been dinged and it's got bumps in it, but who cares? The guide rail is designed to carry that track saw absolutely perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to cut a new Splinter guide. I'm going to show you how to apply it. So what I always do is I start down here. And I go a little bit longer here. And I'm just gonna get a rough measurement on here. Just like this. As I go down, just like this. And then I'm gonna cut it. Just like this. You'll see. Just snip it like that. There we go. So one of the tips I wanna show you on applying the Splinter guide is when you peel it off, okay? You don't put it all the way to the end. Like this, because that's a recipe for disaster. What you want to do is you want to put it just a few millimeters in, and you'll notice right here there's a little rib. See that? That sticky part goes right up against that. That prevents in humid areas for it not to shift. It's like it fits perfect in that channel. But the real tip's coming up on this. Okay, so stay tuned as I tack this on. So I've applied it all the way down to here, right? Obviously, it's a little bit longer. So what I want to do is I'm going to cut that. But I'm going to cut it a little bit shy, a couple of millimeters. Okay, just like that. So if I stand this up, okay, guess what? It doesn't peel off. Now, that is almost guaranteed to peel off. Because if you watched, I was going like this as I was tacking it, right? Okay? That's not good because you don't have full surface adhesion. What I like to do is I like to take a piece of wood. I usually use a domino, okay? And I just spread the pressure like this. That way there, it adheres all the way down. It's kind of like you can use a J-roller, but I like to just use something that's just kicking around the shop. And that way they make sure that that's up against that extrusion, just like this. Okay, so there you go. That's how you do it. All right, that prevents it from weeping off at the end, okay? Two reasons. I spread the pressure all the way down and I cut it shy of the end. And I'm just gonna spread it one more time, back and forth, so I have complete adhesion to that aluminum rail. So there you go. Now, we're gonna cut it properly. So we're gonna match the track saw to the Splinter guide. So I just showed you how to put the Splinter guide on there the way I like to do it. Now we gotta cut it, and we call it marrying the track saw to the guide rail. So one thing you're gonna wanna do, okay, as you set up the saw, is you see these two eccentric cams? You wanna make sure that that's tight on the rib, or where there's no play. So when I do this, I always like to grab it down here, and I want you to hear this. Hear that? That's lateral tolerance. That way, if I left it like that, that saw would be going like this with that front tooth down there. I don't want that. I want this guide rail strip, this Splinter guide, to be married perfectly to the saw. So what I always do is I tighten these all the way up. See how it doesn't move? And then I slowly back them away so there's no play whatsoever in there. Just like this, okay? And there we go. And you'll feel it. You'll feel it. That you gotta, but make sure you check it down here, okay? And that's just perfect for me right there. So what I did now, or what I'm gonna do is, and I've heard a lot of different conflicting theories on this, is should I put it on the board to cut it? Can I cut it off of it? I'll tell you what, off of the board unsupported, I always cut it unsupported, all right? But what I will always tell you is, you see how I have it all the way down here? Okay, now check this out, watch. You see when one of those cams comes off? So that's why I always start it with the cams both on and stop it with the both cams on. So you'll see that as I cut this. And I'm just gonna line it up. I'll get my hose on there. Just like this. And then the plug-it cord. When you put a plug-it cord in, make sure it's always a full quarter turn. Okay, so I'm gonna start it right down here, just like this. Cam is on there. And you'll see right here, see how it's not cut all the way down? It doesn't have to be whatsoever. The only time that that gets cut all the way through is if you're connecting rails. Okay, so there you go. So one of the questions that I'm always being asked is, how do I break down a piece of plywood into manageable, like, cabinet parts? That's very easy, as long as you understand what you have to start with first. You have to start with a benchmark. And that's called straight line ripping your piece of plywood. Because if we can get in here, you'll see how gnarly this edge is here. Okay, we have to, and I've seen confusion over the years, because we used to say, hey, in the old days, let's square up this piece of wood. Where I would see somebody come into a shop and try to get a 90 on a piece of plywood. You never need a 90 on a piece of plywood unless it's for like an architectural panel. Okay, what you want to do is you want to straight line rip it so you have a really good straight line on there, so you can either do a couple of things. Use some parallel guides to get your manageable parts, which we will do at a later time, or if you need to and you have a table saw, now you have a perfect straight line rip or benchmark to put up against your fence. Okay, so setting up the rail, I've seen a variety of things over the years. And I used to set it up like this. Look, take about that much here and about this much over here. Okay, and look at that and say, hey, that's what I need. Now, we're not looking to get 90 on this. We're looking to get a perfect, and I'll say it 100 times, a straight line rip. Okay, now, does it matter if it's, look down here, if it's off like that, just a hair, does it have to be perfect? No. What you don't want is something like this. Because we're gonna take this now, after we get our consecutive rips, we're gonna take this and get 90s on it, but we don't want the veneer to look like this on those panels. So that's why I've seen people over the years go like this and take about 5 millimeters or 6 millimeters off like this and come down here like this. Okay, and you can do that if you want. But I'll show you an even cooler tip. This is the limit stop that comes with the track saw. And if I take that, this is a 6 millimeter offset. This is for plunge cutting. But I use it as a gauge block. My buddy Martin showed this to me. And that gives you the perfect gauge, and that'll bury the blade of the track saw for a straight line rip. Now let's talk about the track saw. We've tuned it in with the cams, so there's no slop here, okay? Setting depth is pretty easy. I usually take it and I bring the blade down and I kind of eyeball it so it's below the surface of the board. Now, if we do the math here, the guide rail is 5 millimeters thick, roughly, okay? Roughly 5 millimeters thick. And if you want to do metric, this board's about 20 millimeter. 3/4 is roughly 20 millimeter. So if I set it at 25 on here and then add 1 or 2 clicks, like I have right here, 27 millimeter, I'm going to cut all the way through. Okay, so I have it set up. I'm going to come over here, and here's a few finesse things I want to teach you about the track saw. Okay, I always wrap the cord and arm around and up above so it's out of the way. Before I plunge and turn it on, I make sure that that blade is forward of the board so I don't plunge down into the board. And as soon as I can, I'm right behind it. I don't stand to it. I stand behind it. Even if I clamped this rail, I don't when I'm ripping plywood, but if I was clamping this on hardwood, there's a tendency, because I'm broad-shouldered, that yes, you can bow these rails ever so slightly, and then you'll have a, hollow in your board. So what I like to do is I like to start at full speed, plunge down, and as I'm ripping, see how I'm right behind the saw? Just like using a handsaw. 3 fingers in the toe, index finger pointing forward. And you'll see with the dust extraction, I get the 36mm on here. And now I'm getting that perfect straight line rip. And when I get to the end, this here is basically the center of the blade. I want it all the way past, and I lift it full speed and then release it. This is the safest saw on the market. So that's the basic way to straight line rip, to get that benchmark and to get started on breaking down that 4x8 sheet piece of plywood. Stay positive and be sharp.